Last night we looked at special housing areas in Auckland, and in part at the criticism that whatever they were achieving on the supply side, they weren't achieving in terms of affordability. One of our guests, of course, was Nick Smith, the Minister of Housing and Building. After what he described as a robust interview, he left the studio, then came back and invited me to come along and see the kinds of special housing areas he thinks are working. How quickly things change. Of course, today's Unitary Plan announcement sees a massive supply side expansion up and out. Special housing areas now appear a kind of holding pattern, really, an interim measure before the Unitary Plan can take effect. But this morning, bang on 9 o'clock, the Minister was here to collect me and our camera operator Claire Easton-Farrelly to take us on a tour of destinations he wanted us, and therefore you, to see. This is before the Unitary Plan announcement that came out this afternoon. But this was the Minister's take on up, out, supply, affordability and providing more housing in Auckland. We were picked up from RNZ in the centre of the city. As usual, we immediately got stuck in traffic. But if we fast forward through the traffic, we're soon going over the Hopetown Bridge, past the apartment buildings that populate this part of the city, over Ponsonby Road and into Grey Lynn. This is where the past meets the future. On the edges of Grey Lynn, new developments increase intensification. Our drive passes through them into the villared heart of the suburb. The century-old weatherboard homes we're passing will sell for $1.5 million, give or take, depending on condition. Then up to Great North Road, a bustling main artery full of cars and commerce. For people who don't know Auckland, you've brought us to Great North Road, and below us is old Grey Lynn, really, and beside us is very much new Grey Lynn, right?
Yes, it is. It's Great North Road, so we're in close proximity to the city. This is the new face of Auckland. If it is going to cope with population growth, we're going to need to have more housing options. The report the government has indicates that whereas previously we've had about 15% of Auckland housing has been apartments and townhouses, that number's now looking more like 40%.
From 15 to 40%, that's a big change, which not only means more people will live in apartments, many more people will live beside them. That's one of the tensions of the Unitary Plan. How do you get high density into traditionally lower density areas? And with all due respect to our tour guide, Great North Road is already doing high density. So, how does this speak to, say, people in Mission Bay, for example, who aren't on the equivalent of Great North Road and who dread that they're going to have one of these in their leafy backyards?
Well, we need to leave the Unitary Plan to decide the where. What the government's been saying to the council and to the independent hearings panel is actually we're not religious about whether it is that Auckland grows up or whether it grows out, and specifically where it should do so. What we're very firm on is that Auckland has historically planned for sufficient growth, and the addition of the up and the out need to add up to that 400,000 new homes that the city is going to need over the next 4 years. We're also very keen to get the apartment and the more intensive housing close to transport links. This is a key main road, and that's why we think an apartment complex on this sort of site is appropriate.
We leave Grey Lynn. Our van weaves back down through the villas built when Auckland's population was somewhere in the region of 60 to 70,000, then pops back up to Great North Road. We're going to speed up now. Across the Bond Street Bridge we go, over the motorway, past Kingsland, past Eden Park, towards Sandringham. Then we turn left into Balmoral Road. And we're heading now towards Mount Eden. Right, Minister, the next stop on our magical mystery tour is...
Well, this is Mount Eden Road. This is a Fletcher development. This special housing area was approved in February last year. It's for 100 homes, a mix of both townhouses and apartments. The project will be completed by 2018. 10% of these apartments and townhouses are required to be in that affordable range that is currently $640. The way we comply that is it's actually at the time the code compliance for the building is, so I can't give the exact price. The Fletcher Living has said that if there is excessive demand for that 10% that's affordable, then they'll be balloting those from those that express an interest.
How do you get into those? I guess one of the questions that is most often asked by people we've been talking to is, how the hell do I get one of those affordable homes?
And look, I openly acknowledge it's hard because there's a real shortage, particularly of new product that's in that sort of range for first home buyers, and the only answer the government can do is to grow that supply as quickly as possible. It is untrue to say that there are none. It is true to say that they are rare. The objective of the government's program with special housing areas, and secondly with respect to the Unitary Plan, is to make sure there is a lot more product that is in that sort of range that average Kiwi families can afford.
They are rare, aren't they? And the only way you can get them to be less rare is to have this kind of arrangement with developers where the quid pro quo under the SHA is 10%, it's up to 20% in Hobsonville, I think. Now last night when we were discussing what could be done, you suggested that it was Stalinist for the government to try and set prices. But you're doing it very effectively here, aren't you? This is working. You're saying, hey, developer, yes, you can have access to an SHA, but you have to provide affordable housing as part of it. Why aren't you doing more of that?
Well, it's only a tweak, and I think it would be mistaken to create the expectation it's the main part of the solution. The underlying problem in Auckland is that you've created this very high section price, and so over the last 10-15 years the building industry has been reorientating themselves to only build the very expensive sort of $1 million plus new home. Now the government is pragmatic and says, look, there's some levers that we can pull to try and get more affordable product. But the long-term answer is actually to get the regulatory rules to make it possible for the private sector to do it all by itself.
I'll cut in there because as we stood there, and many Aucklanders will know this, precisely an example of the sort of private development the Minister was talking about was the elephant in the former quarry a few metres away. Now, if you're listening on the radio, I have just walked slightly down Mount Eden Road. I'm going to summons the Minister across. Thank you, Minister, because behind us here on Mount Eden Road is the gigantic Latent 3 Kings development, which is private. It's not an SHA. This is not a government development in any way, shape or form. How many houses will be here if it happens, Minister?
Oh, the proposal is for about 1,500, so that is a huge input into housing close to the central city, probably one of the biggest brownfield potential developments. I'm very reluctant to comment any more than that. It's been argued over 5 years. It's before the Environment Court, right? Yeah, I've taken the very unusual step of actually joining those proceedings.
So you are before the Environment Court as a witness?
Yes, I am. I'm a submitter, formally as Minister, because of its significance, and so I don't want to make any comment that could be inadvertently interpreted as trying to influence the decision of the Environment Court judge who's due to make a decision any week.
So you strongly support this development, and I guess you're on the record there, right? So that's not influencing the judge?
It is a matter of public record that I've been strongly supportive, but I'm not prepared to elucidate wider than that because of the judicial process underway.
Fair enough, I understand that. Hypothetically then, let's set aside the specific development. How am I going here, Minister? If there are 1,500 homes, right, all of a sudden here, and if we swing around, Claire, our camerawoman is going to swing around, sorry Sharon, the Minister's Press Secretary, so that's Mount Eden Road. And I guess the question is, if we start building very big developments on an infrastructure that is still based around a much smaller population, how the hell does it work? How do the cars, hypothetically, get out of here and onto there and into town?
Well, the honest truth is that if Auckland is going to move to more apartment-style living, then we also need to move to a style of living where every family doesn't have the car. The advantage of this particular site's around Mount Eden Road is that this is a very frequent bus service. And that has actually got to be part of the equation, is linking the housing decisions to the transport decisions. If we are going to have more intensive apartment dwellings and townhouses, we also need to have the public transport services to make it a viable lifestyle choice for people to be living in an apartment and not for mum and dad to both have a car and for them to make a significant number of their trips to work, trips to shopping on our public transport services.
We leave Mount Eden and its public transport users and head by the patchwork architecture of Auckland's roading towards Weymouth. Now, that's south. And to get there, we'll pass through Mangere, Manurewa, then out towards the Manukau Harbour and towards the government's first special housing area run by the New Zealand Housing Foundation on what was Crown land.
It's unique in the sense that it is a government-owned site, and so the government is able to put far stricter conditions on the way the development has occurred. The Housing Foundation and the iwi Collective that we did the commercial contract with, in my view, have done a fantastic job of this development. In total, 297 homes, 164 are completed. They are completing a new house here every 2 to 3 days. We expect to have this development completed by next year. In terms of price points, these homes here are selling for about $430,000, which in the Auckland context is great value for money for a 4-bedroom family home. There are 30% of the homes that the social housing, so they are social housing organisations that are retaining the ownership of them to be able to provide for those very high need families. This is the face of the future. This is what we need to occur effectively 10 times over.
It starts to rain, so if you're listening, we're using a file shot now showing the orderly pattern of homes on small sections that Nick Smith himself calls a flagship of the government's housing policies. The government's proud of this and frequently says so, but this development, driven by the Crown on former Crown land with $29 million from the government's social housing fund, is surely a contradiction of the government's frequent insistence that there's only so much they can do.
Where we own land, we should take advantage of that and get on and build houses. So we have got about 10,000 of the 80,000 homes that are programmed to be built in Auckland over the next 6 years are on government land, and quite clearly when we have government-owned land, then we can put a lot more conditions on it. So Hobsonville, the Tamaki redevelopment, this site, the new site in which I've just done a deal with Fletcher's, we're able to ensure that we get small sections, that we're able to get good quality housing, and we're able to put far tighter restrictions on ensuring it's first home buyers, not speculators, and on ensuring that they are able to deliver pace and are not just land banking.
But we're a long way out here, and the issue with Auckland's Greenfields developments is that they've often moved beyond public transport support. The homes are here and affordable by Auckland standards, but if that's all that's here, it's not enough. In other words, if you build places on the edge of the city, how do you get people to where the jobs are?
And that's where there's that real debate at the heart of the Auckland Unitary Plan as to what is the mix that is correct between how much up and how much out. I'm more open-minded about Greenfields developments. What the international research shows is that providing you've got good schools, providing you've got shopping, you've got recreational opportunities, and you've got work opportunities, then actually there's nothing wrong with cities growing out. In other words, what you need to do is to make sure the developments incorporate all of the common services and engagement that people have. What becomes inefficient is if you have million-plus cities where people are all having to get onto the road and all travel into the CBD in and out every day. And that is where the Unitary Plan process is really important, that you get that well-planned city, because Greenfields growth is fine if it's well-planned and you have those other key elements that people need in their daily lives.
And the key element overwhelmingly that is required in Auckland, surely, is better, more efficient public transport that gets to more people and gets them quickly into town.
Public transport's part of the answer, absolutely. But it has its own expenses and needs to stack up. So do I expect Auckland at the end of the Unitary Plan to have more people using public transport? Yes. Do we still expect to see the prominent transport mode being the independent vehicle? The answer to that is also yes.